If you thought running back was ugly last week, wait until you see the injuries and the bye weeks we are dealing with this week. Tier 1, we don't need to talk about them. If you got them, you start them. We got Barkley, Henry, Gibbs, Jordan, Mason. They're in your lineup this week. Don't think twice. Now, going down to Tier 2, these guys should also be in your lineup. Definitely want to remind you that, yes, we still start Alvin Kamara even with no Derek Carr. Now, the implied team total against Tampa Bay Buccaneers here has been moved down to 19 points. This is actually going to be one of the lowest projections we have seen from the Saints offense all year if you were looking at Las Vegas sportsbooks. And very similar to how we were very much lower on Devon Achane the first week with no Tua, and y'all said you were unsubscribing to the channel because of it. We are going to do the same thing here with Kamara. I think Kamara you can't rank as a tier 1 running back with no Derek Carr. Obviously, the usage as a receiver will give him a baseline floor in a full PPR format where you still definitely start him, but I don't know if we can expect that we have a 30-plus point game in the range of outcomes. Now, going over to our next back, yes, he has been one of the worst picks in fantasy this year outside of the injured guys. Bijan Robinson will be a mid running back 1 this year. Now, of course, Hook 'em Orange, maybe I'm a little bit biased, but if we are taking a step backwards, you are going up against the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers have consistently allowed a gross amount of points to opposing running backs this year. While Bijan over the past 2 weeks, the usage has dipped. The receiving volume hasn't been what you would expect considering Cousins threw for 500 passing yards last week. You get the 10-day rest. Hopefully the shoulder isn't as much of an issue as it was before. You still have some kind of receiving floor, and you have an implied team total of almost 27 points here for the Atlanta Falcons going up against Carolina Panthers, marking them as one of the best offenses in the league this week. Now, going over to our next guy, we'll have Jonathan Taylor. Obviously, if Taylor is good to go, you start him against the Titans. Now, I will keep it posted because right now we don't know if Anthony Richardson's good. We don't know if Jonathan Taylor's good. Y'all know I will update my rankings on flogfantasy.com literally every single day until kickoff. Going over to our next running back, we will have Kenneth Walker. Now, with Kenneth Walker, not going to lie to you, I thought we were about to see a crazy amount of rushing volume against the Giants. Sportsbooks had the Seattle Seahawks as touchdown favorites over the Giants. And what did we see? Not the 20 carries from Walker. No, you saw the 5 carries for Kenneth Walker, saves the day as a receiver, getting you the 8 targets for the 7 receptions and 57 receiving yards. Going up against the Niners, it's going to be a very tough matchup. I think you could make an argument to have Kenneth Walker ahead of someone like Bijan Robinson the rest of season if you really wanted to. But specifically with the matchups here, I think you have to be a little bit lower on Walker this week. Now, in the Thursday night game, which Kenneth Walker is in, you actually have a free Brock Purdy pick, more than less than half total yard on Underdog Fantasy. All you got to do is go to the link in the description or comment section and use promo code FLOCK. On top of that, you'll be getting a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. And if you wanted, you would get an additional free team review over there on flogfantasy.com as well. Just make sure that you are using code FLOCK with the link in the description. Now, going over to Breeland Hall against the Buffalo Bills, the Jets have an implied team total of 19 points. This Jets offense looked horrendous against the Minnesota Vikings, got Robert Saleh fired. You were consistently seeing Rodgers and Brees get hit in the backfield from defenders that were going unblocked. Not necessarily, oh, they put a nasty spin move on the left tackle. No, they just got through the line. It was a complete outclassing from the defensive coordinator here in Minnesota versus what Nathaniel Hackett was able to put together. Now, I thought Hackett would be the guy that got fired, but regardless, yeah, the coaching staff change was probably well-deserved here for the Jets. If you're looking at Breeland Hall over the past 2 weeks, it's been disgusting where he's barely cracked 10 points. But if we do take a step backwards, one, you have the large sample of Breeland Hall as a dominant running back with efficiency, both in 2022 as well as in 2023. Now, going over to Josh Jacobs, Jacobs had the best week of his year this past week. You get the 16.5 fantasy points. See, I told you, draft Josh Jacobs over Derek. Obviously, we don't need to go there. If you are looking at Jacobs, though, it's a great matchup going up against the Arizona Cardinals. I know we said the same thing with Jordan Mason last week, but if you look at implied team totals right now, you have almost a 28-point total here for this Packers offense, projecting out as the second highest scoring offense in the NFL this week, only behind the Baltimore Ravens. And with Jacobs, you've had some usage as a receiver as well. And then going over to James Cook. With James Cook, you've had 3 games with over 15 fantasy points. You've had only 1 game with fewer than 13. He's been extremely consistent all year. Obviously, this Buffalo Bills offense and the play of Josh Allen isn't necessarily what I was expecting it to be. You do still have to be concerned about Cook potentially getting vultured at the goal line. But I mean, he's had a total of 5 touchdowns in the first 5 weeks so far this year. And you have an implied team total of almost 22 points here against the Jets. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we are going to have Brian Robinson. If you're looking at Brian Robinson, you're going up against the Baltimore Ravens. You are pretty heavy dogs here as well. The saving grace is we've seen Robinson, when he's been fully healthy, go out there and consistently draw 3 to 4 targets out of the backfield, draw 20 plus opportunities in what should be one of the better offenses in the NFL. Now, against the Baltimore Ravens, the Commanders are heavy dogs. They have an implied team total of 23 points, but this is the highest over-under of any game in the NFL this week. Brian Robinson, another week removed from his injury. I'd expect the snaps and the touches to go dramatically back up closer to what we had in weeks 2, 3, and 4. James Conner will be our next back. I have James Conner in the flock leagues, my RB1. I really hope James Conner's a lot better than this, and to be honest with you, I mean, outside of week 3, he's been extremely consistent. It's not the worst matchup in the world going up against Green Bay, but very similar to Brian Robinson. You're about 6-point dogs here in this game. And similar to Brian Robinson, it's not like you're a phenomenal receiving back, where this past week we did get the 3 targets out of the backfield for James Conner, but that was actually the same as what we had with the past 3 games combined. Now, Joe Mixon will be our next running back. Mixon can move up these rankings just a bit. Obviously, we're going to be monitoring practice reports. We're going to be updating rankings on the site every single day. I'll be letting you know in the live stream. But if we are looking at what came out of Houston early in the week, it's not like Mixon is guaranteed to be playing. I will say if Joe Mixon misses, there's not a single running back you can start in this backfield, where it does look like Cam Akers has seen a dramatic scale back in usage over the past 3 weeks. Chuba Hubbard will be our next running back. Chuba Hubbard could very easily move up these rankings. Now, what we are going to need to see with Hubbard is we're going to need to see Jonathan Brooks not good to go this next week. If that does happen, Hubbard at minimum goes to the very top of this tier, and he may go to the tier above, because he has been a phenomenal, and I mean a phenomenal running back over the past 3 weeks, where he has been averaging over 20 opportunities a game and an offense that is much better than it was through the first 2 weeks. You have the consistent usage as a receiver. You have the usage in the red zone. He has scored every game over the past 3. He has had a total of 18 targets through the past 4 weeks. It's a decent game if you're looking at the total going up against the Atlanta Falcons. It just all comes down to the usage that we get with Jonathan Brooks, because if Brooks is heavily involved, I do think Hubbard at that point is probably not startable. And then David Montgomery will be our next back. Going up against the Dallas Cowboys, you have a 27.75 point total. This is pretty much tied with the Green Bay Packers to be the second highest scoring offense in the NFL this week. And I think you could very easily make an argument. And honestly, I will tell you right now, I understand David Montgomery is too low in these rankings. We look at what Montgomery was able to do through the first 4 weeks. While Montgomery is averaging fewer than 50% of the snaps in this Detroit Lions backfield, David Montgomery is averaging about 45% of the snaps. You have not had a single game with fewer than 15 fantasy points. He has scored a touchdown in every single game that he's played. He's actually been up there averaging about 2 to 3 targets per game as well. So he's not like he's a 0 as a receiver. It's a good matchup against Dallas, where you have an incredibly high implied team total. We've seen Dallas give up some big games from a rushing perspective before. This Dallas Cowboys defensive line is dealing with a significant amount of injuries. So I will let you know, I'm going to move David Montgomery up these rankings. When you see the flex rankings later in the week, he will be much higher. And then we're going to have Nii Harrison at 17. Najee's been horrible all year. I don't think Najee's a good running back. But yet again, you have no Jaylen Warren. So if you have no Jaylen Warren, what we can pencil in for Nii Harris is pretty damn close to 20 opportunities, and you're going up against the Raiders. So this should be a game where the Steelers are able to lead. They should be able to run the ball in the second half. I mean, if we're just looking at the opportunities that you've had in this offense, week 5, Najee gets 16. Week 4, you get 19. Week 3, you get 23. Week 2, 19. Week 1, 22. So Najee's averaging 20 opportunities a game. It's a good matchup against the Raiders. And you have no Jaylen Warren. So even if he's a bad running back, even if the best game you've had all year, he's had 13.6 fantasy points in a full PPR format, probably still somebody that you are having to start. Now, going over to our next guy, we're going to be looking at DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift, I'll probably be starting in the flock league this week. I am always afraid to just jam in these guys that are playing in Europe, because there is inherent uncertainty, but You do have an implied team total of 23.5 points. So sportsbooks are still in on the Chicago Bears offense, especially as we've seen them improve over the past few weeks. And over the past few weeks, DeAndre Swift has been utterly dominant, where we have seen an average of 25 points scored. DeAndre Swift helped us in week 5. Sadly, it wasn't enough to get us the dub. But he's been used as a receiver as well, where, I mean, if we take a step backwards, you're looking at a running back that's averaging 4 to 5 targets per game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. They've allowed a ton of points so far this year. They are favored in this contest. So I think Swift is kind of that must-start mid-RB2 at this point. I'm a little concerned that the efficiency may fall back down to what it was previously. And then going over to our next guy, we'll be looking at Tony Pollard. With Pollard, it's a bad offense. Yes, you have a good matchup going up against the Indianapolis Colts. Yes, you had 22 carries against the Miami Dolphins, but against the Miami Dolphins, the Tennessee Titans were able to blow them out. Are we expecting that is the game environment here? To be honest with you, probably not. If you're looking at the spread on this game right now, you actually have the Colts favored by about a point. I'm sure that it's going to change as the week goes on. So it should be a competitive contest where Tajay Spears should have a role as a receiver. I don't expect it to be a great offense, even though Pollard has looked very good so far this year, especially with him going out and averaging about 4 targets a game. Now, Zach Moss will be much higher in these rankings if Zach Moss is good to go. Now, obviously, we're recording this super late on Tuesday night. I'll be updating every single day throughout the course of the week. If you are looking at Zach Moss, he had 75% of the snaps in the Cincinnati Bengals offense before getting hurt against the Baltimore Ravens. What I have read regarding this Zach Moss injury makes it sound as if it's not that serious, that Moss has a really good shot at playing this next week. And if that does happen, the Cincinnati Bengals are heavily favored here against the New York Giants. And we can assume that this is, yet again, one of the best offenses in the NFL. But this week, they should be able to be a little more rush heavy than what we have seen in the previous, or at least against the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, against Carolina, they ran the ball over and over and over again. So Moss will go up if he's good to go. Chase Brown will skyrocket if he's not. And then our next guy will be Rico Dowdle. To be honest with you, Rico Dowdle may fall down these rankings just a bit because what we have seen with the Detroit Lions rush defense so far this season is Detroit's going to say there is a 0% chance we are going to let you run the ball. Dak Prescott may drop back 60 times in this game. Now, with that being said, it should be one of the highest scoring games of the week. If you are looking at Las Vegas Sportsbooks, I think it has the second highest over-under at the time of this recording. That may go up to being the highest over-under. And Rico Dowdle had 22 opportunities in this offense this past week. The opportunities have been trending up pretty much every single week consistently here for Dowdle, where you get the season high in total fantasy points, the season high in total rushing yards, in total carries, and you get the receiving touchdown against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we're going to be looking at J.K. Dobbins. I actually think that Dobbins is an appealing buy low candidate, where if you are looking at what we had 2 weeks before the bye, J.K. Dobbins actually took over, where you saw the 18 opportunities against the Pittsburgh Steelers, 3 of those coming in the form of targets, and you had the 18 opportunities against the Kansas City Chiefs, with 4 of those coming in as targets, in a game where the Los Angeles Chargers actually ended up losing. Obviously, this Chargers offense, their plan A is going to be to run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. I think that's what we probably see them doing against the Denver Broncos, where right now they are favored by about 3 points. Now, my hesitation with this is Denver, while they've been garbage on the offensive side of the ball, they have a pretty good defense. You have an implied team total of only about 19 points here for the Los Angeles Chargers. So I think Dobbins, you definitely can start as a low-end RB2. I just don't think it's something you absolutely have to do because of the matchup. Now, Travis Etienne will be our next back. Travis Etienne going up against the Chicago Bears. It's a tough matchup. We are going to have to monitor the injury that you have. Obviously, the injury led to a massive boom with the role of Tank Bigsby this past week. But what we actually saw is Bigsby still had absolutely nothing as a receiver. Travis Etienne in a game where I don't want to say he gets benched. I don't want to say he gets pulled. I don't know, in a game where the usage dramatically falls, where you actually only see 38% of the snaps in this Jacksonville Jaguars backfield, he still had 7 targets. He had 6 receptions for 43 receiving yards. He's still the passing down running back, and possibly if he is fully healthy, you have some more usage as a rusher as well, but clearly trending in the wrong direction, and this is a tough matchup. So if you can avoid starting any Jacksonville Jaguars running back, we probably do. Jerome Ford will be our next back. With Ford, the usage trends down, only 58% of the snaps against Washington. in a game where you would assume that, hell, they're having to drop back to pass pretty much every single snap. You should have a lot of Jerome Ford out there. Going up against the Philadelphia Eagles, right now sportsbooks are projecting out the Browns to be a bottom 3 offense with an implied team total of only 17.5 points. The main thing that we are going to have to keep our eyes out for is, will Nick Chubb play? Because obviously if Nick Chubb does play, then Jerome Ford is not startable. Now, Rashad White will be our next back. If we are looking at Rashad White, 22.5 point total for this Bucs offense. Going up against the Saints with no Derek Carr, we can assume that this Bucs team decides to run the ball consistently. White still had the receiving usage over Bucky Irving as of late. Rashad White has had back-to-back games with 10 carries and 13 total opportunities. But yeah, I mean, White, even with the long rush this past week, you take that away, and he's averaging like 1.7 yards per carry in that game. So, I don't know, still inefficient, still in a committee. I guess you could say it's a decent matchup going up against the Saints, where we saw Kareem Hunt run all over him last week. Tyrone Tracy will be our next back. So Tracy obviously has room to move up if you officially have no Devin Singletary. I will put out a little cautionary tale, little cautionary flag. Eric Gray had every single snap on third down. It looks like Eric Gray may be used in obvious passing down scenarios here for this Giants offense. And going up against the Cincinnati Bengals, I don't know if we can say safely that the Giants will be winning this game. The Giants are probably going to be trailing the majority of it. So I think maybe, just maybe, the usage of Tracy goes down a bit in this backfield, even if Devin Singletary does miss, and we see a little more Eric Gray. But clearly Tracy would be the guy that you want. We're going to have to read the injury reports with Singletary, and then we'll adjust the Tracy ranking for that. And then Chase Brown will be our next guy. Chase Brown, this is the ranking assuming that Zach Moss is good to go. It is a great Bengals offense. We get the receiving touchdown for Chase Brown against the Baltimore Ravens. And in this game, he dropped 16 fantasy points. So now you've had back-to-back weeks of over 15 fantasy points with Chase Brown, averaging about 20 points per game. Now, that is under the context of them blowing out the Carolina Panthers and being able to run the ball over and over and over again, and with the context of Zach Moss getting injured. So if Zach Moss is fully good to go, I think we have to scale back expectations with Chase Brown just a bit. But if Zach Moss is ruled out, just give you a sneak peek of the flex rankings later in the week, Chase Brown would probably move up to be running back 12 as someone you have to start. But if Moss is good to go, I think he's just flex consideration. Ramondre Stevenson, it's hard to say he's anything more than flex consideration. I benched Ramondre last week. Feel very dumb about it. Obviously, he scores the touchdown. I wish that he was in my lineup, but I don't really regret the decision. Consistently, pretty much every single week, you're seeing sportsbooks project this Patriots offense to be one of the worst offenses in the NFL. This week, they have the lowest implied team total of any team in the NFL at 15.25 points, even with Drake May in the game. This is still going to be one of the worst offensive lines in the league. This is still probably the worst wide receiver core in the league. And Antonio Gibson played just as many snaps as Ramondre Stevenson this past week. So I am hoping, I am praying that I am wrong, that Ramondre comes out. He is the starting running back yet again. He takes more snaps than Gibson, and the Patriots offense is saved with Drake May. But I am not super confident with that. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we will have Javante Williams. Javante, we actually started last week because it was a great matchup against the Raiders, where you actually had the Denver Broncos favored, where here against the Los Angeles Chargers, they are dogs by about 3 points. Bo Nix has still been very bad. Bo Nix, I think, has maybe 2 and maybe 3 passing touchdowns so far this season. If you look at Javante, he's definitely the running back you want here in Denver if you were going to start someone. We actually see 63% of the snaps in week 5, which is the second highest mark that we have seen since week 2 against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Obviously, he's getting involved as a receiver as well. He gives you the 10 PPR points just with the receiving usage alone this past week against the Raiders. I will have the big decision to make this week with my own team. Do we start Stevenson or do we start Javante? I would really love your opinion there. Alexander Madison, this ranking will be subject to change. This is a ranking under the assumption you have no Zamir White. But if Zamir White does play, even if Alexander Madison is still the starting running back, you would have to assume Zamir White takes some of this backfield, that Madison's not seeing another 18 opportunities like he had this past week. And it is one of the worst offenses in the NFL. I think Madison, Stevenson, Javante are all very, very similar. They're all the guy in the league's worst offenses. And that's not something to be really excited about. Bucky Irving obviously has a role in Tampa. That role is obviously expanding in Tampa, where you see a career high 43% of the snaps. This leads to 11 total opportunities. The main thing is Rashad White still getting used as a receiver here. So with the Rashad White receiving usage, I think Bucky Irving remains just as a desperation flex play, but more so somebody you're excited about the hidden handcuff appeal, if anything were to occur to White. Roshan, we can say the same thing with Roshan, obviously get 3 touchdowns over the past 2 weeks. Really helps my underdog best ball teams. But the reality is DeAndre Swift has everything as a receiver. And you're going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars, so it is a good matchup. But with the total of 17 opportunities over the past 2 weeks, I don't know if we can say he's a must-start player, but premium handcuff back, of course. Now going over to Tank Bigsby. Bigsby, thank God he came out and helped our underdog teams this past week. But with that being said, he has had 1 target all year. With that being said, we are assuming that Travis Etienne is fully healthy, and this is a brutal matchup going up against the Chicago Bears, where right now the Jags are about 2.5-point dogs. It's a London game where things can get very weird. I know that Bigsby crushed last week, and 100%, he is somebody that we need to be rostering, and he could move up dramatically based off the practice reports and the availability of Travis Etienne in this offense. But to be honest with you, I would rather not start any Jacksonville Jaguars running back at the moment, where you do even have Dearness Johnson getting involved and kind of turning this into a 3-man running back by committee. Zach Charbonnet will be our next guy. Charbonnet, Breeland Hall, Tyler Algier, we can all throw them in the same boat. These are all very similar to the other running backs in this tier, right? These are running backs that if an injury were to occur to the guy in front of them, they automatically become must-start options, league-winning options. But with Kenneth Walker healthy, you've had 2 weeks of 7 opportunities for Charbonnet. 7 opportunities against the Lions, 7 opportunities against the Giants. Going over to Braylon Allen, you get 9 opportunities 2 weeks ago, 7 opportunities this past week. Braylon Allen sees a low relatively with only 26% of the snaps. Last time you saw the usage that low was actually back in week 1. Tyler Algier, yes, this past week he has 9 opportunities, 10 the week prior. But I mean, you have 1 game with 10 fantasy points, and that has been his season high so far this season. So I want to give him the benefit of the doubt because it is a decent matchup against Carolina, but obviously it just kind of looks like a premium handcuff back at this point. Going down to our next guy, Austin Ekeler is somebody that I started this past week, and Ekeler has actually had 10 fantasy points at least in every single game that he has played so far this year. Now, my concern with Ekeler is they are getting Jeremy McNichols involved still. McNichols has been having success. So this does look like maybe it's more so a 3-man running back by committee. Tajee Spears will be our next back. With Spears, back-to-back games with at least double-digit fantasy points. Yes, against the Miami Dolphins, where the Tennessee Titans blow them out of the water, you do have 15 carries for Tajee Spears. But the reality is, against the Indianapolis Colts, I don't think we're expecting Spears and the Titans to be able to just ground and pound and have 40 total carries across the offense. And then Antonio Gibson as our last back. He was technically the quote-unquote starter. I don't even know. It doesn't matter. He had 7 opportunities in the league's worst offense last week as the quote-unquote starting running back. So at this point, he's pretty much just a pure desperation play. And if anything happens to Ramondre, you can get him in. Now, obviously, we have a lot in the air when it comes to the injuries. So I'm going to continue to update the rankings on the site literally every single day until kickoff. And of course, if you wanted to go get that free Brock Purdy pick, more than less than half a total yard, going up against the Seattle Seahawks on Thursday night, you can find that link to Underdog Fantasy in the description and comment section. Just make sure you use promo code FLOCK. That way you get that free pick. You get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. And if you wanted, you would get a free team review over there on flockfantasy.com as well. Just make sure you have an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your Underdog Fantasy account. That way we can hook you up with that free team review voucher. But I appreciate you and really hope I get to see you in the live stream later tonight.